Hey, I'm Steven and this is Solving the Money Problem. If you're new, welcome. If you're not, welcome back. So guys, this is going to be a little bit different. I'm probably actually going to leave this video unlisted because I don't think that it's going to appeal to the majority of my YouTube subscriber base and audience. So if you're not interested in numbers and going super nerdy and looking behind the scenes, don't bother. It's not going to be for you. This isn't a typical format of video I would ordinarily post to the main channel. Something more like for Patreon exclusive content or YouTube members, etc. It's probably not going to be as polished and tight as usual either. But again, this is really just about giving you guys an insight and a look behind the scenes. So it's real and raw. It just is what it is. So let's dive in. Hey guys, before I forget, Webull have a great offer for US residents. You can get a free stock just by opening an account with Webull using the link below. Get a second free stock by depositing $100. And if you're in the UK, Australia or New Zealand, Stake also have an offer of a free stock. Link in description. Alright, let's get back to it. So here we are looking at my stock portfolio. Now this is a custom spreadsheet I've built in Google Sheets. I recommend everyone do the same thing. You've got to track and measure and know where you're at, what your goal is, and how to bridge that gap. So it's really important to actually understand the numbers. Now for some people, this is going to be a lot more enjoyable and easy. For others, it's going to be a little bit of an ordeal. But look, at the end of the day, you really need to know where you're at if you want to get to where you're going to go. So what we're looking at is my stock portfolio. I'm sure a few of you have already had your eyes darting around, not even listening to what I'm saying. Cool. So let me just point out a couple of quick things. This total here is in Australian dollars. It's AUD. This is automatically being converted. All my stocks are in US or foreign currency. So I have 1,000 Tesla shares. I'm just going to run through bit by bit now and show exactly what we're looking at. So Tesla makes up most of my stock portfolio. We can see here in this little bar chart, graph, whatever the fuck they're called, that Tesla stock here, 92.55%. This data is being pulled from here, by the way, guys. So you can have a look here. But effectively, we've got Tesla as the majority of my stock portfolio. A couple of percent are in Google, well, its parent company, Alphabet, and Amazon. Got a tiny little bit in the ARK ETF, ARK W. Kathy Wood, shout out to Kathy and co. They're awesome. And also just a little bit, a percent or so in Tencent. These purchase dates, just for anyone who's a little bit unsure, the purchase dates that you're seeing here, the buy date, is the very first time I bought that stock. I've continued to accumulate, so I have actually bought them more recently than those dates would show, but this is just the first time I got in that stock because I haven't sold any Tesla, Google, Amazon, don't plan to. We can see over here that I've actually held for 1,556 days was my first buy of Tesla stock. This is a very unbalanced portfolio, but this represents the decisions that I've made with my personal investment. Nothing more, nothing less. So for context, I'm actually going to scroll down now into this spreadsheet and show you guys some of the transactions. This is basically my entire transaction history, all my purchases of all stock. This very first Tesla, one of these first two is actually Solar City, which then was acquired, so they became Tesla. But just for the record, the same day, the first two stocks I bought were Tesla and Solar City. I've accumulated a few things here and there besides Tesla along the way. Usually it was just a matter of spreading my risk, but more so seeing opportunity there. If all of these stocks I had retained, you can see that the percentage growth in this column here. So if it didn't sell any stock I ever bought, some of the stocks I have sold, for example, like Intuitive Surgical, 150% return over 4 years, not too bad. I ended up selling that, moving that money into Tesla. I sold a bunch of stocks to buy more Tesla. If you haven't seen that video, check it out. Just search on the channel, you'll find it. Details, what if I had kept them versus selling them, profits, loss, all that kind of stuff. From 2017 in November until now in June 2020, all I have purchased is Tesla stock in my portfolio. That says a lot. That's basically 3 years. I'm going to show you a Tesla chart now because I'm sure most of you are Tesla fanboys or fan girls or fan whatever you identify as. Here we are with my Tesla stock buying history. I'm going to run you guys through this. I actually did this for Patreons and YouTube members recently, but I just want to show you, give you some context and understanding too. I was aware of Tesla, from the original Roadster, but I wasn't confident or comfortable to even consider investing in stocks, let alone that particular company for some time, but I kept an eye on what was going on and I'm a nerd, so I saw a lot of things that were happening in industries and things that mattered and were relevant to Tesla's future and ability to execute, grow, etc. Saw a lot of potential. By 2016, I'd started a finance business. I'd quit my job as a designer. My income basically tripled in the first year, going from a designer working for somebody to working for myself. So I had a lot of cash suddenly to do something with. I couldn't invest in real estate because I'd started my business. I would need to wait 2 years to get 2 years of tax filings to actually be able to borrow money from lenders for more real estate. So I didn't want to leave it sitting around. The first investment I made into Tesla stock was literally maybe like a month or two before the actual Model 3 reveal. This was like the time where I'm like, we know this car's being revealed. I can see them executing now. They're doing well. I'm confident in this. This is a good time to start buying. And over time, I continued to accumulate. So this is how many shares I bought basically each time. We've got 11 there, 13, 35, etc. Now these dates, so this isn't a linear scale along the bottom. Like 2020 takes up almost half of the entire thing, and this runs from 2016. So just keep that in mind. There was very, very heavy buying in 2016 and 17, basically because that's when I was working basically 80, 90, 100 hours a week in my finance business doing nothing else. Had no social life, no expenses. I was living in a shared house that they did laundry and provided meals, like all sorts of stuff just to save time. I spent nothing. So I had a lot of capital to invest. So the biggest buy there on a single day, I bought 149 shares. September, November, bought another 100. There was pretty heavy buying here. I retired just around here too, mid-2018. So all of these purchases are actually since I retired and/or am now doing the YouTube channel again. But just for context, we can see here, heavy buying, retired, didn't have as much capital here. For the record, this is all stuff from selling shares. Basically, I didn't have a whole lot of savings at this point. I'd retired, so not earning a whole lot of income, just some recurring stuff from old finance biz. And here we haven't had a whole lot of capital available until the YouTube channel started, which funnily enough worked out perfectly. There was another buying opportunity this year and I suddenly had all of this new income and cash that I didn't have previously, so I was able to take advantage of that. Now over on the right here, this is the purchase buy history, so how much I paid for the stock. Now these are sorted by date. What's quite interesting for me to look at on reflection is there seems to be three sort of really strong ranges, or really only two really strong ranges of buying, somewhere in that sort of 180 to 250 range around here. Then there was a tiny bit, in that 500-600 mark, but then the rest of the buying has sort of been around that 750 mark. This wasn't intentional. This is just how things have actually panned out. Of course, there's a lot of buying activity in this price range because when Tesla stock got this cheap, I went berserk and I'm like selling stocks and squeezing like every last drop of money that I can to actually get into the stock. In 2020, there's been a lot of buying activity, but it's been much smaller. Again, if we look over here, the number of shares purchased each time, my biggest buy in one day has been 16 shares of Tesla stock, and 17 and 23 and 15 versus a couple of years prior, 149, 100, 111, 60, 50. Most of my buying has been cheap, a little bit high, and most of my big buying has been early, not so much recently. Hope you're enjoying this. I know that there's not going to be a ton of people that are still watching because this is just super nerdy, down in the weeds. Let's look at what happened. So my portfolio basically began, let's call it 4 years ago. It's 2020 now in June, so 4 years, 2 months if you really want to be generous. I put in total, the cost basis here in Australian dollars we're looking at, the 473,000 has turned into 1.4 million. I've got triple what I started with. I've made 211% on this. Now, keep in mind, this return factors in currency fluctuations. So if the Australian dollar and the US dollar move against each other very dramatically, I could record this video in a few days and this amount here could be very different. It could be 1.1 million. Could be 1.5 million. Who knows? So that can actually have a very strong influence over the total value of my stock portfolio. It is what it is. I'm in Australia. I buy stocks in the US and overseas, so I have to have these conversions just happen automatically. I would say that the return on this is pretty reasonable. If we had recorded this video 6 months ago, things would look very different. Tesla stock was a third the price it is now. Very different picture. But I just wanted to give you guys some context, show you behind the scenes. This is the thing that I've built to track my stocks. I really do recommend everybody else build their own. It doesn't have to be super elaborate, but do something and track and measure so that you can actually understand where you're at and if you're on track or not with your goals. Just one final thing too to point out down the bottom here, you may have noticed the net worth over time. I don't have markings on those. I'm not here to try and flex or anything. Or what matters more with the net worth tracking, in my personal opinion, is the trend. This is really the way that I like to look at my net worth. My goal years ago was to double my net worth every year for as long as possible. It gets pretty ridiculous, right? If you double 30 times, you get to $1 billion. So if you start at $1 and let's say you're 20 years old, by the time you're 50, you'd be a billionaire if you actually successfully doubled your net worth. It's not necessarily long-term sustainable, but I wanted to see how long I could do that for. If we have a look over here, without getting sort of too down into the details, I had basically no net worth in 2008. This is when I first began full-time work. This is my first full-time job. I did have a little bit of cash. I was very frugal, but not a huge income. And what happened in 2010, I bought my first property. In 2013, I bought my second, and I bought that undervalue, which caused an immediate jump in my net worth. Basically earned almost my entire annual salary as a designer in one day just buying that well. I did the same thing again the following year. I did 2013, 14 and 15 consecutively bought properties in consecutive years, well undervalued. That catapulted my net worth, plus they were in growing markets, which sent things moving further. Then I started a finance business and tripled my income, which just sent things literally flying to the moon. And then I retired in 2018. And my income obviously dropped off a cliff. As I said, there was some recurring income from my finance business, but there was a huge drop in my overall income at that point in time, and there hasn't been much of a change in that until quite recently. I'm earning considerably less doing YouTube than I was in my finance company, but the majority of the upswing of my net worth from 2019 to 2020 has been Tesla. I continued to buy when it was low. Tesla stock price will literally move this graph in the future for me. The thing to think about now is today, if Tesla stock's $1,000 and I've got 1,000 Tesla shares, then if Tesla stock gets to 2,000, then I've added an extra $1 million to my net worth. It's very easy math now. So it's going to be very easy to track in the future. If Tesla does a 5x or 10x over the decade, and I think, look, honestly, 10x by 2030, that's feasible. I think that that's where the stock is likely to end up. I think it's less likely for other outcomes on either side of that. I think that like the most likely scenario is somewhere in that 10x range. Then that's probably another $10 million. So I'm going to try to continue to double my net worth as long as possible. Again, it's like, I know that it's exponentially more difficult to continue to do that, but why not have that goal? I'm almost on track to have doubled my net worth for 12 years consecutively. Almost. I'm a little bit behind. The point is, measure this stuff, track it, set some ambitious goals, and have an idea of where you sort of stand, and I think it's well worthwhile. So I hope you guys have enjoyed this. I'm Stephen Mark Ryan. This is Solving the Money Problem, and I love you all. And don't forget your free stocks with Webull and Stake. Links in description. Thanks so much for watching. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And of course, if you have any ideas for future videos, let me know. I read all your comments. P.S. If you're still watching, you're awesome. If you'd like to access exclusive videos, regular Q&As, behind the scenes content and more, consider supporting the channel at patreon.com/solvingthemoneyproblem so I can keep creating content for you guys. There's a link in the description, and you can now also become a member of the channel for some exclusive perks. To learn more, click the join button next to subscribe. Either way, the best form of support is you being here and watching, so thanks again.